Well, hey there, my friends. It is, once again, Flashback Friday here at RHR Riffs, and the subject of today's video is the great Neil Young, who hails from Toronto, Canada. He was born in 1945. Neil Young has been through just about every decade of rock and roll except for the 1950s. Did you know that Neil Young and Rick James were actually musical partners at one time? This guy has led an absolutely fascinating career. Later it went to, of course, Buffalo Springfield, then Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, then out on his own. Neil Young, he's a world all to himself. What a great musician, fantastic songwriter. Neil Young, straight out of the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s, the original grunge rocker. Let's talk about him on today's Flashback Friday. This is RHR Riffs, the rock and roll guitar channel. Neil actually dropped out of high school and started working in different bands all around Toronto and Winnipeg in that area. He met Stephen Stills and Joni Mitchell in that area, actually. And Joni Mitchell was quoted as saying that he was heavily influenced by Bob Dylan at the time, and that certainly showed through the rest of his career. Sugar Mountain, which he wrote really early on, you can kind of hear that influence, and definitely one of my favorite songs of his. But he had so many incredible songs. But some funny facts that maybe you weren't aware of was that in 1966, Neil had joined Rick James in the band the Mina Birds. The band managed to secure a record deal with the Motown label. So Neil Young was with Motown with Rick James. Now, would you ever have thought that? But as their first album was being recorded, James was arrested for being AWOL from the American Navy Reserve. After the Mina Birds disbanded, Young and the bass player Bruce Palmer decided to pawn the group's musical equipment and buy a Pontiac hearse, which they used to relocate to Los Angeles. So you can see Neil Young driving out from Toronto to LA in a Pontiac hearse. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Once in LA, Neil Young joined up with Stephen Stills and Richie Furay, and of course they had formed the Buffalo Springfield. Then, of course, later on, Neil, who felt like the Buffalo Springfield was going nowhere, left and went on his own. Then later joined Crosby, Stills, Nash to form Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. You know, the funny thing is that when you watch Woodstock, you see Crosby, Stills and Nash, but you don't see Neil Young, but he's there and he's performing. He just refused to be on camera. He only wanted the show, or his performance, I guess, to be for the audience and the audience alone, not for any movie. Pretty interesting. So he didn't want to be sponsored even back then. He signed a deal with Reprise Records, home of his friend Joni Mitchell, where they shared a manager, Elliot Roberts, who managed him until 2019. That's a long time, and that's why I mentioned that. You just don't hear that very often in the music business at all. For Neil's next album, he recruited 3 musicians from a band called the Rockets. That was Danny Whitten on guitar, Billy Talbot on bass guitar, and Ralph Molina on drums. These 3 took the name Crazy Horse after the historical figure of the same name, and then recorded Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere, which was in May 1969, and it was credited to Neil Young with Crazy Horse. Recorded in just 2 weeks, this album included Cinnamon Girl, Cowgirl in the Sand, Down by the River, just some outstanding stuff. Southern Man, again, amongst so many other great songs. The Needle and the Damage Done, that's one of my favorites. Why don't you guys let us know in the comments some of your favorite songs by Neil Young, whether he was in a band or doing his own thing. Let us know your thoughts on this. I was really looking forward to doing this Flashback Friday because Neil Young has been such a huge influence. You know, he's supposedly the original grunge rocker and all that stuff, but I think he goes much deeper than that. Again, he took folk and kind of country and rock and heavy metal and did all kinds of strange things with it, but just made some outstanding music. Guys, please let us know in the comments about your thoughts on Neil Young. I'm really curious. Alright, thanks so much for joining us for this Flashback Friday, and we'll see you next video.